It's a thing of beauty.
You taking it in? You're taking in the hat.
I'm taking it in. I'm taking in the hat.
If you're
Quite
watching,
beautiful.
you can see the hat. No further explanation is needed. If you are just listening to the audio, I'm wearing a Washington State Cougars hat. I
Yeah.
didn't lose a bet. I
Didn't lose a bet. With pride, you're wearing a Washington State Cougars hat.
I wouldn't say pride. I'd say willingness is maybe a better
Sure.
word.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Tolerance.
I don't know. You were pretty enthusiastic about it a couple weeks ago. Ben Coog sent you a Cougars hat, and you had thrown a challenge out into the world that if someone sent you a Cougars hat, you would wear it. And do you regret it at all at this point, or do you just enjoy the free hat?
I enjoy the free hat. And you know what? When I got this hat, first of all, shout out to Ben Coog. Good hat choice.
Sure.
This is one of those like snapback corduroy hats, which are, I would say, becoming pretty popular. There's a lot of these types of hats out there. And I never would have bought this type of hat for myself because I just assumed I wouldn't like it. But I actually kind of do like the corduroy style hat. So like this is, it's a good intro into other hats like this. Now I can go get like a Mariner hat like this or something like that, you know? So
I've been surprised at how much of like a fashion forward guy. I know, by the way, it's all in the realm of like athleisure and hats and stuff like that for you, but it is like, I'm surprised at how much cultivation goes into this this look that you have. You got a Roback shirt on. We need a promo code for this company at this point.
Oh, I love Roback. Yeah. If you're a golfer of any sort, you probably know Roback to some degree. But I mean, you can relate to this because we're both like we're bigger bodied dudes. You know.
Yes, you bring this up every episode as though you think I'll forget between episodes.
Just so you know, we're still large or extra large.
Or maybe add some X's. I don't know. Whatever. Do what you want.
Yeah, but when you're a bigger dude, like comfort is very important. I never have any sympathy for skinny people because like clothes can just hang off you the way that, you know, like when we grew up in the 90s, everything you wore just kind of hung off you and felt comfortable as a result. And you kind of figured, oh, this is how I'll just live the rest of my life wearing comfy clothes. And then you grow up and you get bigger and you find that shirts don't fit you like they used to.
Right.
And so I'm constantly on the search for like comfortable clothes. And the pandemic helped a lot with that, not having to dress up for work every day. I was able to find things that actually like fit me well and were easy to wear. So yeah, I tend to be, I guess I would say I've always been fashion conscious. I worked in retail for a long time, so I worked in places that had an influence on me like that. But it's not.
What was your retail jobs were like Champ Sports or something?
I also worked at Nordstrom for a long time too,
Wow.
which yeah. So you get surrounded by enough of that stuff and you get influenced by it. Was kind of like the perfect storm because James Sports is like very sneaker, like, you know, urban wear focused.
Sure.
Right. So I got really into sneakers and I still am because of that job. And then I go work at a place like,
The
I work at a
sneakers
place
is
like
surprising to me. You don't seem like you'd be super into sneakers.
Oh no, I'm a sneaker fanatic. Yeah,
it's
sneakerhead
crazy.
for sure. And then I go work at a place like Nordstrom, and obviously that's just kind of more upscale, fashion forward, right? So it's like you combine those two things, it's kind of a disaster, man. I'm not gonna lie, but yeah, over the years, I guess I've done okay fashion wise, as well as a guy of my age and generation can do. I'm not out there just wearing an Under Armour t-shirt and like cargo shorts every day, at least.
Sure. I don't think you should disparage that look, if you wouldn't mind. That's my culture. If you would not insult it. Yeah, so the hat you're enjoying. I also feel like regardless of, this is my assessment of you as a person, is you're the type of person who, even if you did in fact regret asking for the Cougars hat, you'd never give an inch on it because then you know Ben Coog owns you a little bit for the rest of your life.
Well, I know Ben Coog personally. I'm not going to say his real name, but I know him personally. He's a cool guy. He's a good dude. I mean, like we've talked about this before. There's just as many good Wazoo fans as there are UW fans, and vice versa. Bad ones too. But he's a good one. He's one of the good ones. So I appreciate the gift. Like I said, I don't really mind wearing it. Yeah, it doesn't bother me. Now I'm sure there's going to be Husky fans out there that are pissed. But to me, it's like
voice your opinions, Huskies fans. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, if you really hate it, I totally understand. I feel like a lot of Husky fans hated me to begin with. So, you know, but you know, UW got a lot of my money, so I can do whatever I want now.
I want to, before we get into sports stuff, I want to ask you, because I think right up your alley, pop culture wise, there's two Nickelodeon documentaries that are out right now. One that's like, I think, kind of a positive documentary, and one that is one that obviously paints a horrific picture of what was going on behind the scenes of Nickelodeon. And I want to see if because you did a little bit of attempting to guess a thing about me that we should talk about also, by the way, because yeah, we'll talk about that in a moment. My guess about you is that if you were going to watch one of the Nickelodeon documentaries, do you watch documentaries at all?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Of course.
Okay.
I do. You gotta stay informed.
So yeah, you got to stay informed about things that happened 35 years ago. That my guess would be that in the Akita household, you'd be watching the positive Nickelodeon documentary that maybe glorifies the days of All That and Keenan and Kel versus the one where it's like every child got molested and things are terrible.
Yeah. That's well, here's the thing. I don't know if the positive one is new. I definitely watched a positive.
It must have just hit the algorithm because the
the
horrific one came out.
I think the positive doc that you're referring to, I watched about a year ago.
Gotcha.
And it was good. It was like really like if you grew up watching Nickelodeon in the 80s or 90s, this kind of traced the lineage and the history of Nickelodeon, how it all came to be, and how they didn't think they were going to survive, and then ultimately thrived. So yeah, I watched that one. So I guess your assessment would be correct since I have done that.
Because I'm curious.
Like
you're on Twitter, we experience much of the same world. I think probably me a little bit different. We probably have. I bet I follow like more politically minded people than you do. Would be my guess. I could be wrong, but my guess is that I do. And I've like, for me, there's like horrific stuff going on in the world. I don't need to see pictures of it all the time, right? Like I know that it's probably, whatever like first world benefits or whatever like in privilege. I don't need to see children being pulled out of rubble in Gaza. Like it's not going to sway my opinion one way or the other. I think what's going on is horrific. I don't need every day to wake up and be re-traumatized over and over and over again. And I kind of feel that way. That's why I don't understand how these documentaries get so popular, where it's like, we know kids have gotten exploited. I don't need to know the specific. And it's not even like I'm ignorant to it. I believe it's happening. I'm not in denial. I believe it happened. I don't need to know like the very intricate details of all this stuff. You can just tell me, hey, some fucked up stuff happened at Nickelodeon to these specific kids. Here's what it is. I don't need that to watch that kid cry on camera as a 41-year-old man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's I get what you're saying. I mean, especially in the age of social media, we're constantly reminded of like not just the bad stuff, but the good stuff too.
Sure.
People constantly just want to celebrate their wins, and that's like a generation ago that wasn't a thing that was happening. You hear good news from your friends when you got together or whatever, but you weren't constantly being reminded that you're inferior all the time.
It's weird how traumatizing both, like almost equally traumatizing both those things are to like watch your friends go on vacation. There's people I know who are like, they think that I'm like crushing it in comedy. I have a relative who I went out to my uncle's funeral, and she's like, "Do you remember me? I'm your mom's I'm your mom's cousin's daughter." I'm like, "Yes, I grew up with you." It's not like nothing about me has changed. I'm first off, whatever you think about me, like comedy fame wise, you're wrong. There's zero of it. There's zero of me that's like, I've actually met too many people to continue to remember my aunt. Not the aunt, by the way, also the aunt that commented last week. She apologized to my mom for commenting on the podcast, which is very funny to me. It's like, no, that was, by the way, maybe our only comment of the live episode, if I remember correctly. So thank you.
Slow week, yeah. No.
Well, we keep moving the start time around in people's defense, and I've had multiple people actually tell me that they attempted to watch live and we were done when they logged in.
Fair. That's fair. How many multiple? Like more than
two.
More than one, less than three?
Yeah, more than one, less than three. Exactly that.
All right, that makes sense. Yeah, no, it's the understanding of popularity index at this point is it's very generational. Like you have to be part of the social media generation, which I believe we are the peak of that generation. We're the first generation that ever really grew up with social media.
Well, we're the last generation. They also had part of our childhood without social media.
Yeah. So it's like we're the oldest people that are going to understand social media, really understand it. You know, there are
Sure.
people that have like trained themselves up who are older than us, but
Yeah.
just at a glance, I mean, it's our generation. And so like we have an understanding of how it all works, right? Like everyone just pays attention to the number next to your name, whether it's the number of followers, the number of likes, the number of retweets or reposts or whatever, right? Like that's
Yeah.
what people determine to be popularity now. And that's, you know, it's the reality of the world we live in, whether it's good or bad. I'm not really sure, but
Yeah.
I've also benefited from it, so I can't be that upset by it, right?
Yeah. So tell the world how you misjudged me, Alex, because
Well, I misjudged you in a multitude of ways. Let's start with the most recent one, and then we can work our way back to something I pulled out of the Ardsman interview, which I did listen to the Ardsman interview because I'm an ally of yours.
that's good. That's actually good to say before we go into this next part, because this is going to be a contentious part of this podcast.
Well, obviously you've had a very good run with your NCAA tournament bracket. It's been good.
99.9th percentile
Right.
in both.
You won our pool last week, and there were still 3 more games to be played, which says something. I mean, that's
the other one I'm in. I won the championship game is irrelevant. It doesn't matter who wins the championship.
To lock
game,
it up before the championship, let alone the entire Final Four weekend, that's impressive. It doesn't often happen.
And also, by the way, I might have locked up the R's in the Elite Eight before the Elite Eight. I don't know.
Probably,
I didn't look at it then because I was actually wondering if they had any like win probability or projection stuff, and I found it right before the Final Four.
No, my misjudgment of you is that you were not in any fantasy sports leagues. And here's a real thing that people like you and I deal with. Like when you grew up being competitive, playing sports all year round, you know, whatever the sport may be. As you get older and become an adult, your outlet for competitive endeavors, that window can narrow to the point of closing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, I don't know for 100% certainty, but I'm just going to guess by looking at you that you don't play sports anymore.
Yeah,
so
just
that
golf.
Yeah, just golf. Yeah, we both golf, I guess. But like to me, golf, as somebody who grew up playing competitive sports, golf to me is not super competitive. And I feel like you're similar to me in that. Like, I don't see you get angry on the golf course. I don't really get angry on the golf course. I see other people do it from time to time, but for me, it's like, this is recreation, not competition generally.
Sure.
So, you know, if you don't have like an outlet for competitive nature, I can see how you would throw all the eggs into the basket of the NCAA tournament bracket. So I misjudged you. I thought maybe that was your only outlet for competition right now, but you informed me that you're in a number of fantasy sports leagues. So I apologize.
I did go fully. I called it a fantasy sober for a couple of years, which is like because I played fantasy. My first year of fantasy football was Terrell Owens' second season, which I know because my dad was like, "Here, take over my league." He played in this league where we would fax in our lineups every year or every week. Also, you couldn't make like transactions the way that every transaction you had to pay like $5 to make the transaction. Sure. And it was only like every 4 games they would meet up at some bar. I could never go to these meetings. I would have to send my dad with like a shopping list of players. You know what I mean? And sure. I remember it was that league specifically because I didn't understand draft pick value at the time. And so we had the first overall pick and I was like, Terrell Owens is going to be great. And I was right. This is before he had like a huge breakout, right? I was right. I think I was still a year early on him being incredible, but also like this is a time when Emmitt Smith is still a very good running back in the NFL, where there's I think Ricky Williams, Edgerrin James, that like stretch of running backs was around. He was the wrong guy to pick with the first overall pick, but I still feel somewhat validated that he actually became a Hall of Fame receiver. Yeah. But yeah, dude, I played fantasy football up until like I think maybe 2016, and then I started again, or maybe 2018, and then I started again in like 20 or 21. And then I played in a dynasty baseball league somewhat recently where we had you could keep 25 active roster guys plus 10 prospects, and it was like year round. People would never leave it alone. I'm in a dynasty football league now and 2 regular. But I don't talk about them a lot because what I've learned in life is that
no one cares about
nobody cares about your fantasy league at all. My wife is thrilled about this. My wife is spending this bracket winning money already in her mind, so she's thrilled about this. But otherwise, she couldn't give less of a shit. And I play in a league. I actually was gonna say how big the payout was. It's but I'm not going to. It's a bunch of like very, very, very degenerate fantasy players and sports gamblers, sports bettors who play in this league where you pick the champions of a bunch of different leagues. It's like I think 12 different leagues, down to like literally the Little League World Series is one of the sports that we draft.
Definitely sounds degenerate.
It's
yes.
very bad, yes. And but I want to say I split the payout, but it was like in the 4 digits payout. We've
good.
won 1 year, and I think we took second or third. And like that makes the payout a little bit more worth it, but that's a lot of work. And also I have a friend, my very good friend Matthias does most of the work for our team, and I'm just there to like yay or nay on when he has he needs someone to break a tie,
Sure.
and then I also pay into the league. So,
We've
anyways,
spent way too much time talking about fantasy.
yes, everybody's turned it off at this point.
It is sad that because I mean obviously I play fantasy sports too, and it is sad that those have replaced real activity as an outlet for competitiveness. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think our ancestors envisioned things getting this way, but here we are.
Sure.
The other thing, I didn't misjudge you on this. I feel like I got this right. But in your Ardsman interview, he was talking about things he liked to do in Seattle. It was a good question. You asked him about things that he liked to do when he lived here, and he mentioned Pesos, the bar in Lower Queen Anne, and you didn't know what it was. You actually you cited Paseo first, which is. That's how I knew you really didn't know what it was. Is that
yes.
You got it? Like, okay, so here's the thing.
I can't go back and fix this, Alex. It's
no, you
too
can't.
late.
There's no. Well, yeah, it's too late. But he gave you, or I gave you a hard time via text about this.
That's
because
okay.
Pesos, and this is maybe where listeners can relate. If you are a Seattleite and have lived here for a while, and especially in like the mid like 2010s, early 2010s ish, Pesos was the spot. I mean, I was glad to hear that Ardsma and his teammates would often go there, because I'm sure there were probably nights that I was there and they were there and we didn't even see each other because it was a pretty big bar.
Sure.
There were places, there were little pockets in there where people of any kind of repute, like Mariners players, for example, could kind of hide out. And but it was a true meat market, man. That place, he mentioned that a lot of beautiful women at these bars, which was true. But a lot better looking people than you and I, even in those days when we were at our peak, would inhabit that bar. But it was a legendary spot, and really, I would say maybe one of the iconic all-time Seattle bars. Every generation kind of has their iconic Seattle spot, and I feel like for our generation, that might have been the
interesting.
place.
I will say, like, from 18 or 19 to 25, I worked night shift in a box factory. And I started dating my wife when I was 23. So there was not like a going to Pesos to meet these beautiful women period of my life that would have been. A lot of that stretch, by the way, I was working weekends, like 3/12s overnights. This explains this blank spot in my Seattle
gap
knowledge.
in your resume. Yes.
Yeah. It sounds, by the sounds of things, being a guy that's making like $31,000 a year and walking into Pesos with like printing press ink stains under my fingernails, probably not do it. And then having to drive these would-be suitors down to fucking Auburn, Washington, where I rent out a bedroom from a coworker of mine, is probably not the way that you experience Pesos at its full potential.
I think in my experience, most of the people were faking it till they made it.
That's fair.
Because it is a lot of people, a place like that, it's a lot of people in their 20s, maybe early 30s. There's always some people that are older than that are hanging on or being a little creepy. Like if we went to a place like that now, we'd be the old creepy guys, right?
Yes.
But back then, everybody, there's a few people in that age bracket that are pulling in some real cash, but most of them were probably like me, where you're just you're taking whatever money you have and buying drinks on a Friday night because that's the only thing you have.
You're like pre-gaming somewhere else to get a buzz to be able to go there and have like maybe pay like $40 for 2 drinks.
Very common thing that people did with that. Absolutely. And I didn't exclusively spend time at Pesos. Just down the street was Oscar's Kitchen, where me and my friends would mostly hang out. That was Sean Kemp's bar. Also, rest in peace to that place. It's gone now.
God damn, I thought we were breaking news on Sean Kemp for a second. That would have been terrible.
I think he's still good.
Yeah.
In that same
Just
neighborhood,
keep your
is
hands off his cell
Ozzy's.
phone.
Yeah, Ozzy's is obvious. That's still there. Ozzy's is a very popular place. I've actually been to Ozzy's in the last few years, and not my idea to go there. Somebody else's idea. But as soon as you walk in, you're like, nope, too old for this place. There
Yeah.
are Ozzy's kind of caters to a different clientele where like you do have a mix of younger and older. But if you're there and you're just like, if you're over the age of 35 and you're there, you're going to get annoyed with it really fast. It's just, you
Yeah,
don't
I
wanna
became an
deal with
old
that.
man in this regard pretty young. My sister used to go to this place. My sister, by the way, could have a kid. She could be in labor right now. She's like on the verge of having a child.
Congrats to your sister.
Thank you,
Congrats to
yes.
you as well.
Thank you. That's who really deserves it.
It's you, yes.
She used to go to this place called Buckley's.
Oh yeah,
Have you, yeah, this
it's
is
in the same vicinity as all these other places.
right.
Yeah.
And I went to this place one time, and it's one of those places like walk in, walk out. Like never. I'm not buying a drink. I'm not talking to
Yeah.
a bartender. I'm not dealing with it. The music's too loud. These people are supposedly trying to watch sports, and it's so obnoxiously loud in there that like, how is that a sports watching experience for anybody?
Wow, if you are annoyed by Buckley's, then these other places would have absolutely destroyed you.
I believe you. I agree. I
feel
one
like-
agree and two believe you.
Buckley's is more, it almost kind of caters more to like the 30 to 40-year-old crowd, but I agree, it gets very busy in there. The key to all these spots, all of these places that are like this is you got to like make friends with people who work there. That is the key, because if you make
Sure.
friends with people who work there, A, you're going to get discounts on your drinks, and we already went over the fact that you don't have a lot of money. And then B, you can avoid lines. All those places
Yeah.
are always busy. So we got to know some of the people at these various bars, and that always helped. But my one peso story is one time I was in there, and I was talking with one of the waitresses, and she was going into great depth about how she was having an affair with then Yankees first baseman Mark Teixeira. Now, apologies to Mark Teixeira if that's not true or not accurate. This is just what she was telling me. That's all I'm relaying. This man could be on the straight and narrow for all I know. But
Yes.
at the time, she was insistent. And that's a pretty deep cut, for
That is a deep cut.
For a waitress to be like, I'm having an affair with Mark Teixeira.
Who was the guy that played third base and DH because he was there? Like they both should have been first baseman, and he played across the diamond when they played in Texas, not in.
Okay, yeah, in
Fuck.
Texas. I don't know. In Texas, he had Beltray for a while. But
Okay,
that might have,
you figure this out, and I'll.
yeah.
You
anyway,
continue.
yeah. I mean, she was going into great. This was like a 15, 20-minute conversation, just telling me about all these things about Mark Teixeira. I guess she figured I must have been into sports, and so she wanted to. But it was the type of story that she's probably telling everybody she meets that's even remotely interested in sports. That Mark Teixeira comes in here and is her boo on the side. So, that's the kind of place Pesos was, man. It was just a lot of social interaction. Looking back on that period in my life now, I wonder how I even did it. It was enjoyable at that point in my life. Now it would be a complete nightmare. But yeah, iconic Seattle spot, I would say. That is one of the all-times. And one other thing, Ardsma also mentioned a place, I believe he said on Lake Washington, but I'm pretty sure he was referring to Lake Union because he said there was one in Bellevue as well that had
Gotcha.
the most beautiful patrons he'd ever seen. Pretty sure he was referring to Joey Kitchen and Lounge.
Okay, so there's also one of those in South Center. There was at one
Yes.
time.
South
That was
Center.
on my mind too, but I just don't know I've only been there one or two times when I used to work out there. So yeah, that sounds right actually, and that's my
Joey-
fault for not understanding this. Listen, I'm not taking any blame for Pesos. I don't think there was ever a time in my life where Pesos and I would have had a compatible relationship. Joey's I've been to on a couple occasions, and I should have been able to redirect the conversation to talk about. I call Joey's Rich Hooters.
Well, the funny thing about that is that, I mean, Ardsma is a dude that hasn't lived in Seattle for 12 years, and he still remembers Joey Kitchen and Lounge, which was Sark's favorite place to go. They opened one up in U Village, and I mean, you can look into that as far as you want on message boards or whatever, but Sark loved that place too during his time in Seattle. And yeah, it's something about, if you know a place is good, if people who haven't lived here in over a decade fondly recall it. So another iconic Seattle spot over the years. But
So
that's all. That's all. I
I've
wanted.
discovered my my Mark Teixeira across the diamond mate. I want to give you a little bit of information on this.
Okay.
It would appear that Mark Teixeira never had any overlapping years with Adrian Beltre in Texas.
Okay.
And the guy that I was talking...
Wait, can I guess before you say it?
Yeah.
I think I have it. I think it's Hank Blaylock.
It is Hank Blaylock. Good job. Yeah. You're 1 for 2 on these.
Nice.
Okay, I want to talk about, we should get to sports at some point. We are pre-recording this, by the way, which if anybody wonders why, like, the fucking satellite crashed into the earth, a Russian spy satellite, and we're not talking about it, that's why, because it must have happened later Monday night. But I spent a big chunk of yesterday watching the women's national championship, which I want to say first off, like, I'm not a guy who's doing this for feminist reasons or anything like that. It was genuinely compelling. It was a really good game between South Carolina and Iowa. And I'm going to say some nice stuff about Caitlin Clark. Obviously she's lost. She's lost both the last 2 national championship games, and she's remained the story, right? This is the greatest women's college basketball player in the history of college basketball. She is so fun to watch. Like, her game is so fun to watch, and I'm gonna compare her to someone. I can't think. Part of it is ignorance to women's basketball. Part of it is because I really think she's revolutionized interest in women's basketball for sure. In the kind of the same way that some of the like mid '90s women's tennis players really revolutionized interest in tennis, where they found a way to play a different game than the men were playing, but a game that was very entertaining to watch. And I find the way that many of the women on the court yesterday, but especially Caitlin Clark, played to be kind of a little bit of a throwback in a way to a time when basketball had positions, for example. We're not going to see the same kind of very obviously most of these women are not able to dunk in the acrobatic fashion that NBA players are. That part of the game is a long ways away, I think, from entering the women's game. But the way Caitlin Clark plays, and people will compare her a lot to Steph Curry, she does have this incredibly quick release on her shot that's like she can go from dribbling to getting a shot off in a way that's like very similar to Steph Curry, and I understand the comparisons. From like a strictly shooting perspective, she reminds me a little bit of Ray Allen, which is like, again, this guy's 6'5" and could jump out of the gym, but she plays the game of basketball in a way that I would say like Michael Jordan ushered in. I'm not comparing her to Michael Jordan. Everybody relax. Shut up. Michael Jordan changed the way basketball looked. Michael Jordan was like the first. Remember, like Clyde Drexler was the Michael Jordan before Michael Jordan, and you think of their games.
Yeah, he's the reason the Blazers didn't draft Michael Jordan.
Right, and you're like, that dude feels like he's a billion years older than Jordan, because Jordan brought about the modern looking game of basketball. And I feel like Caitlin Clark, to a degree, did that. She's taken 35-foot 3-pointers. She's shooting off of the dribble. But I mean, so much of women's basketball historically has been these like kind of dribble to a spot, set shot, these like really, really fundamental things, and not incredible shows of athleticism. And I feel like this is why it gets criticized, and maybe I'm fucking speaking out of school and I'm a huge sexist for saying this, but she looks like, and I'm also not suggesting, by the way, Caitlin Clark can't play in the NBA. That doesn't need to be the case.
But she can play in the Big Three for
that, which is great, by the way. Also, she's the NIL, which we have to figure out a way to talk about every fucking episode, it feels like, is somewhat responsible for this, because she sticks around for the entire time she can stick around in college. I think maybe, I don't know if she had any more years of eligibility, but yeah, because she's making more money than she would make in the WNBA, and I'm sure she will go to the WNBA, and wherever she ends up in her career at the various stages of her career, she will continue to be interesting to people in a way that, like, I remember Sue Bird being interesting in Seattle. I don't remember that being like a national phenomenon the way Caitlin Clark is.
Well, this is a pretty nuanced conversation, I feel like, and I do have some opinions on it, but there's a lot to unpack when it comes to not just women's basketball or Caitlin Clark, but like women's sports in general. I think, one thing that she personally has done over the past year and slightly over a year, I mean, Caitlin Clark really entered everyone's consciousness last year during the tournament. That's the first time people saw her. She had some controversy with Angel Reese and just some back and forth. and that kind of brought her into the general public's existence or knowledge of her existence. So for the past year, in this entire basketball season, she's kind of been the figurehead of women's college basketball, which is it's a big burden to bear. And I'm sure there are probably some people in her game, in her sport, that felt that was unjustified, right? Like they probably wanted more screen time for themselves or more of the spotlight to themselves, where she was kind of taking all that. But I do think you're correct in that the way that she plays the game is unique in that it draws attention and it's fun to watch. And that's not, whether fair or unfair, that hasn't happened a lot with women's basketball in general, let alone college basketball, really ever. I mean, there's been, I'm not so sure that she's the greatest women's basketball player we've ever seen. I mean, you could make an argument for Cheryl Miller or Lisa Leslie, even like more recently, like Sabrina Ionescu. There's a lot of like really good women's basketball players over the years. It's just we haven't had visibility into them the way that we have visibility into Caitlin Clark. And to ESPN's credit, at times it almost feels like they're going overboard trying to force feed the masses women's college basketball in tandem with men's. And I get it. A lot of that is because they have more rights to women's basketball than they might have to men's basketball, especially this time of year. So, of course, they want to get eyes on that sport. So, of course, they're going to tell you about it and promote it. And what comes out of that societally, you can argue the benefits of that. And certainly there are a lot of them. But it's giving the exposure to a sport that maybe hasn't had it in the past. We haven't reached equality yet. Obviously,
but
in a lot of
that's
ways.
not even like, I guess like that's to me the like, I don't know. You're not going to get there in one stop. You know what I mean? Like this is an enormous bit of progress, and I don't think you rest on your laurels and celebrate it. But it is like this is a huge step for women's sports. I really believe that, and I also think it's also not contrived. I think that's the thing is like a lot of times we'll talk about these incredible accomplishments, and people have to make a point of saying, she's not just one of the best women's basketball players, she's one of the best basketball players that's ever. And it's like we all pretty much know Caitlin Clark could not be on an NBA roster, but that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant.
I think this comparison between men's and women's basketball is silly. I mean,
agreed.
It always happens, right? Like as soon as there's any exposure to the women's basketball game, then you hear people talk about how it compares to the men's game and why it's not as great. Like, I'm like you. I don't really watch a lot of women's basketball. And that's not because, like, I'm a horrible human being. But it does feel like if you don't put men's and women's basketball in the same sentence, then there's something wrong with you, right? We're almost like there, and this happens with any kind of like, I would say second tier sport, like not to be offensive to these sports, but even like if you think about hockey to some degree or soccer, any second tier sport that starts to suddenly gain visibility and exposure, there's always gatekeeping from the fans who have stuck by that sport since the beginning to some degree, right? Like if you want to talk about women's college basketball right now and you don't do it in a positive light, then you're a bad person. Well, the reality is if you really want equality, then all people are going to do is shit on your game because that's all they ever do with men's sports right now. That's what generates debate, right? That's what generates debate is that we clown on the NBA. We clown on men's college basketball. We clown on baseball. We clown on football. That's what kind of spurs that debate. And so if you're going to see the progress that you want to see and get that exposure for your sport or your game, then you're going to have to like release the reins a little bit and let other people in, the good people and the bad people. But that's what generates the topics and that's what generates the discourse that you want to keep evolving that sport. And so that's when I say we haven't reached equality yet, it's because people still talk about the sport in a strictly positive light for fear of if I say anything bad about it, then I'm going to get ripped to shreds. Right.
Yeah. That's true.
At the same time, I think a lot of the comparisons between men's and women's basketball are quite lazy. I mean, I saw a local news journalist covered, I guess by the time you're hearing this, it'll be 2 days ago's women's national championship, but covered this and did it in a very, I would say, lazy way. I mean, saying that the women's basketball game is more fundamentally sound than men's basketball. I would disagree with that. I think there are a lot of fundamental elements in women's college basketball, but there are just as many in men's college basketball, having seen both of them. I think why we often say women's college basketball is more fundamental or fundamentally sound. Part of it to me seems like it moves at a little bit of a slower pace at times than men's. And so if you're just a novice viewer, like being able to watch that and comprehend it because of the speed becomes easier.
The fundamentals are laid more bare by and I'm not, again, this is like just the honest truth. The fundamentals are laid more bare because of the lack of athleticism.
Well,
compared to the men's game. Compared to the men's game.
I mean, I would just say the pace in general, whether you want to attribute that to athleticism or not. I mean, we don't know. We just don't know.
Speed is an athletic trait.
Yeah, I mean, but the pace.
I'm trying to be honest. I'm not making a judgment here. I thought it was an incredibly fun game to watch.
Yeah,
on
but
both sides.
I used to joke about this when when Kelsey Plum played for UW, and the UW men were not very good. It's kind of started as a joke, but as the joke became bigger, it became more of a reality. I always was under the impression that Kelsey Plum was good enough to beat some of the crappier UW men's basketball players in a game of one-on-one. And people were like, there's no way that could ever happen. Like, I'm very confident Caitlin Clark could go up against some of the more average or lower talented men's college basketball players and beat them in a game of one-on-one. Because even if you're like face guarding her the whole time, she's going to get that shot off and put some buckets up on you. I'm not saying she can go play in the NBA or even in the Big Three against like ex-NBA players. But to think that it's like there's strictly going to be this athletic imbalance, I don't buy that. I think some of the best women's basketball players are better than average men's basketball players, or even some of the better men's basketball players. And I can say that from experience. I've played, in pickup games.
So hold on though. I mean, first off, this is where we get into this like exact thing we're talking about, because I don't think it's true. I don't think that Caitlin Clark is better, but I think this is where we get bogged into this like fantastical conversation that's like really not the point, which is it doesn't really matter. First off, I don't think Caitlin Clark could beat the 8th man on any Division I team. Let alone,
I do. I think she could.
And I guess the one difference I will say is there's probably guys who are 7 feet tall and can't move very well that she could beat, but like I think that she would be in the very bottom. But again, to me, the point of this is like whether this is even true or not, whether I'm right or not. It's like we're falling back into this shit where we're having this conversation. Serena Williams acknowledges that despite being the best women's tennis player in the history of tennis, she probably couldn't beat the 300th ranked man. It doesn't matter. She's playing. Yeah. It's almost functionally a different sport, and that's fine. And it's especially fine because Caitlin Clark and this game were very entertaining to watch.
Yes,
they were without any of the fucking trying to grade it on a curve of men versus women. It was fun to watch on its own merits, yes. Unrelated to men's sports.
I took us down a rabbit hole when you opened up the athleticism argument.
But by every definition of athleticism, it's the case, but it's irrelevant to the conversation.
You're going to think what you want to think, and I'll think what I want to think. But that wasn't the point. I shouldn't have even gone down that path.
You're such an ally, this guy, and I have to be the bad, honest person.
I reversed course on my original point, which was
I know you completely fucking.
Right. I did exactly what the bad journalist I was just talking about did, except I did it in a more, I don't know, hopefully entertaining way. But this comparison, saying that women's basketball is more fundamentally sound than men, I don't necessarily buy that. I think, we have a lot of these tropes. It's like when you say a white receiver is sure-handed or a gym rat or something like that.
Runs great routes.
Right. I mean, it's like we fall back on these narratives that are easy to fall back on. And it feels like, as we get more exposed to women's college basketball or just women's basketball as a whole, if you are, if you're making a lot of those comparisons, it's easy to fall back on those classic narratives rather than pay attention to what's actually in front of you and see it with your own eyes and interpret it. I mean, the reality is like, you're going to like what you like. I always feel like if you prefer to watch men's college basketball over women's college basketball, that's totally fine. And if you prefer the inverse of that, that's fine too. You don't often hear people of these sports that maybe don't get the same exposure as the most popular sports leagues in the world, you don't often hear them criticize other people for not watching their sports, unless they're soccer fans. Soccer fans, they're a different breed. They always want you to like soccer. It's like, okay, we don't all have to like soccer.
They all feel like it's the first time you've ever heard that the rest of the world calls soccer football too.
Yeah,
It's like, oh,
okay,
you're the first person. I'm 37
Right.
years old, and you're the first person to bring that to my attention. Thank you
Right.
so much.
I think just the reality for people in general is everybody has a limited amount of time in their day, and you're going to spend it doing the things you want to do most, you know.
Sure.
And if there's two basketball games on and one's a men's team and one's a women's team, you're going to gravitate to the one you prefer. And doesn't mean you're going to, you know, it's not like society's fault that happened. That's just what you happen to like more. Like,
Have you seen the Bill Burr WNBA bit?
I probably have heard it. I'm not positive. Where
Okay.
it goes.
I
Go
think
ahead,
you would
Sam.
remember it. I'm not going to say, I'm going to just encourage everybody to go because I think he makes one. I mean, obviously he's taken some liberties for comedy's sake, but he makes some very good points, which is people blame the failures and struggles of women's professional sports leagues on men when over half the people in this country are women and they are also not attending the games, basically. And in this case, though, there were enormous audiences for these last two women's national championship games and Final Fours and tournaments. And that's like, this is what I'm saying is like, to me, this thing where we're like getting to, it's there's this great Freakonomics podcast that I've listened to in the past about, it's called In Defense of Incrementalism. I think it's something like that. And it talks about how like, it felt like in 2013, gay marriage became legalized overnight, but it was decades of activism and fighting for gay marriage to become legal. And then there's this one thing that pushed it over the edge. But if it were not for the people being activists in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, we wouldn't have even reached the point where it was inside the Overton window for Barack Obama to make it to, you know, the whatever executive order, make it legal across the country. And that's, that's kind of the way I feel about this, which is like, this is a huge step. Like this, we should be just going like, fuck, this is really fun to watch. Let's enjoy the next 15 years of Caitlin Clark playing basketball publicly, hopefully, if she, you know, injuries notwithstanding, and hope that she continues to grow the game. Right.
Well, yeah. And I think, I mean, part of that, just like the example you cited with gay marriage, I mean, it's the exposure in the public consciousness
Sure.
to whatever that thing is. And in this case, you know, networks, they're always going to try to make money, and they want to make money however they can. And ESPN somewhere along the line realized that they could make money by promoting women's basketball, whether it's college or even, I mean, you've seen more exposure with WNBA. And so whether you like it or not, like if they realize they can profit off that, and it seems kind of scummy that it takes money and the bottom line to drive what they're going to promote to people in the public spectrum, but that's what it takes, right? Like, I mean, you can think about something like reality TV. 25 years ago, reality TV barely existed, but once they realized that it made a lot of profit for these networks, it's everywhere now, right? It's totally rampant. It's like, not to compare, that's kind of an unfair comparison, but it's just whatever a big entity or a television network wants to drive, it's going to lead to that exposure and open people's eyes to whatever that thing is. And right now it happens to be college basketball. And you're right, Caitlin Clark, because she has become the face of that game for the past year or so, it lets us see how good that game can be, because she's certainly probably one of the best that has ever played at that level for sure. And just like when we were introduced to Steph Curry in the men's tournament, I don't know, almost 15 years ago now, probably, maybe even more than that. Yeah. When you see somebody who does it unlike most of their peers, you take notice. And that's a good thing.
I will say that like my favorite kind of player, and I don't think I'm alone in this, obviously, is like a great shooter. And there's no doubt that Caitlin Clark is a great shooter.
Yeah.
You watch, I mean, you see her put up a slightly contested three-pointer and you feel like it's going in. You see her put up a 35-foot three-pointer, you feel like it's going in. That's the kind of player I like to watch. She happens to be a woman, but it was I really enjoyed it. And I was like ready to be like, I will say this. I felt a little bit guilty because we watched for my money. We watched the semifinals, the men's semifinals, and my daughter goes, "When are we going to watch women play basketball?" And I was like, "Fuck, we have one more chance." So we made a point of it. She didn't pay attention at all, by the way. Like I kept guilting her, and I'm like, "This is, we're watching this. It was supposed to be special. You're fucking playing with Play-Doh, even though you guilted me into this yesterday, kid." Like, but yeah.
Well,
anyways,
now that I know that your favorite basketball player to watch is a great shooter, the next time I go shoot around at the gym, I will invite you to come watch.
Oh,
wow. You can watch me shoot threes all day.
I'll be like your high school girlfriend. You have a Letterman jacket I can wear of yours when I go.
You can just sit there and occasionally cheer. That'd be great.
All right, let's. I guess the one thing I want to talk about, and we can talk about it as brief. The Mariners are terrible, as kind of like we expected. I don't know if I don't really. This is the tough thing about this specific topic for me because it's going to be like an ongoing thing with this podcast. The Mariners are very likely to be disappointing this year because they've been disappointing for most of their history. I don't know how many times I want to keep rubbing salt into that wound. Like, what are we? We're
it's
2
funny
weeks.
Because usually I am the nihilist, but your opinion on the Mariners is like the most nihilist.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess to me, it's like they're either going to be good or they're not. But they're 4-6 right now, which somehow feels like a miracle. Like, I don't know. There's talent on the team. It always feels like the Mariners start out like hitting sub 200 and clawing their way back to respectability. This feels like the way every year starts. I'm not even a nihilist in that. Like, I'm not. I think nihilist is a great word. I'm an April nihilist when it comes to baseball because I just don't think April matters.
Yeah. You and I are probably more sensible in the fact that we've been baseball fans our whole lives.
Yeah.
So what a team does in April, for as much as people like to overreact to it because it's the beginning of the year, it often doesn't matter. I mean, you've seen a lot of even like world champion teams suck in the first month of the season and then go on to great things later on. And that's pretty common. So I think you and I get that. But have you ever seen a fan meltdown as quick as the one the Mariners seem to be enduring right now? Because it seems like in the first week, almost 2 weeks of the season now, week and a half or so, fans usually it takes them like a month to go through the gamut of emotion. They've done all that in the first 10 games. And to the point where they've been optimistic about the season starting, to being, optimistic about the first couple wins, and then incredibly pessimistic ever since. And like already writing the team off 10 games into the year, even the organization. I can't, I'm used to seeing the tweets and the replies from people who swear they're never going to give the Mariners the time of day again, whether it's via their money or just watching on TV. Those are already mounting up, and we're just barely through the first week of April.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the last couple seasons, the disappointments from the last couple seasons, followed by the dismissive Jerry DiPoto comments that they're just never going to leave our consciousness as Mariners fans, I think. And we got some comments. By the way, someone in the comments of our YouTube video where I posted is it too early to be pessimistic or whatever? Someone called us Jerry DiPoto apologists, which makes me laugh so fucking hard. Like I've been
trying to get this guy fired for like 5 years.
I've essentially resigned myself to this team will never be good until he's gone. Like the fact that anyone would consider us DiPoto apologists is funny. I think he radicalized a lot of fans against the team this offseason, something that was already kind of bubbling, right? Like they've been disappointing for so long. Truly, I mean, they make like one playoff appearance, but they've been disappointing since 2001. And that was the stretch of really good Mariners teams goes from 1995 to 2001, and it's been dog shit since then for almost everyone that's a Mariners fan. And so the idea that this is like somehow new, or is this just, I'm not saying this about you. I'm saying like he awoke an already angry mob. You know what I mean? With these comments, at a point, they at least were under the guise. This like fake, we kind of all knew it was bullshit, but I remember David Locke back in the day before he left, before the it's like God, this is like early 2000s. He talked about how his understanding of the Mariners ownership is they wanted to spend $90 million, win 90. It was 90-93. They wanted to spend $90 million, win 90 games, get 3 million people through the turnstiles.
Sure.
That's what they want to do every year. They're not really interested in winning a championship. 90-93. And that's the kind of the way I've viewed the ownership since then. And the ownership has changed now since then. But that's kind of the culture that they've created there. And they at least paid the lip service to us that they were trying to win a championship. They've never gone for a championship. They've made a couple like late season pushes in the past. They've never actually seriously attempted to win a championship. And that's like, I've resigned myself to that. But then to go acknowledge it, to spit in our face, to say we should feel lucky, I think it radicalized a lot of Mariners fans. I think that was the most colossal PR fuck up of the Mariners that I can remember.
Yeah, I would agree that the Mariners as an organization, at every chance they get to build up goodwill with fans, they do the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of self-inflicted wounds, I feel like. The Jerry Dipoto 54% thing is probably going to be his legacy here in Seattle unless they happen to win a World Series. You know,
right.
I think even at this point, if you got into the playoffs next couple years, even made it to like a championship series, the likelihood of that becoming Dipoto's legacy and not these 54% comments and kind of just the way he patronized the entire fan base, it's going to be very, very tough to like kick that out of people's minds.
Yeah.
It's like if you go back and look at Sean Figgins' career, there were probably some bright moments for Sean Figgins as a Mariner, but people only remember him for two things: not being very good, like certainly underproducing to his contract, and also being a dick to the media and trying to fight his manager. Those
Sure.
are the things you remember about a guy like Sean Figgins. Once you kind of get branded as a bad guy for whatever reason or another, it's very tough to work your way back from that. And I think that's kind of the problem with Jerry Dipoto. It's the problem with the organization as a whole. You know, as ownership has stood by a regime that really hasn't achieved a lot and kept them employed for over 8 years now, like, it's tough to separate ownership from management and on-field results when ownership is really sticking to their guns with what people perceive as bad management. And so it just destroys a lot of goodwill. And then to add fuel to that fire by saying things in the media every chance you get that insult the intelligence of the people who are paying to provide for your product, basically, it's just it's bad. It's a terrible combination of events. And then most recent thing is when the team comes out and probably feels some pressure to perform based on how things have gone, not just historically, but also recently in the offseason with some of the comments that have been made by your own bosses. It puts a lot of pressure on you to perform. And so when you come out and maybe don't exactly hit the ground running, I mean, it's like the perfect storm. And the Mariners always seem to find a way into this perfect storm. Yeah. And the fact that they keep doing it, I agree. I mean, I'm with you. It's like, it's almost better to just ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist because this is silly. Like, we do this every single year, but that's part of what being a fan is too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that nobody is probably more sympathetic to the idea of like running a 3 or 5 year budget and doing a thing where you like really make a push at the end of those 5 years, right? Which I think is kind of what the Mariners are doing right now. Also, I think there's like a lot of uncertainty about what the media contracts are going to look like coming up. And so many of them are basically going into default that it's like not obvious to me that it's going to be, I know the Mariners situation is a little bit different, but like they are facing some uncertainty financially. So I actually would not have been on its own. I'm not even offended as it is that they didn't go after Shohei Ohtani, that they reduced payroll. They still have a relatively high payroll. I'm not deeply offended by that. Yeah, it's the dismissal of the fans. Anytime you are telling an angry person that they should feel lucky, they are not going to respond with gratitude. Like, that's the reality. And when it's a collective group that can fucking gas each other up to be more angry at you, it's a bad situation that you put yourself in. And that's the situation the Mariners are in right now. And so, like, I don't know what to talk about every week with the Mariners because They are probably not good, right? But there's a lot of fucking baseball to be played, and I don't, there's also another person that was like, you guys are, overreacting too early, and I'm like, we did quite the opposite of both these things. Can you watch the fucking clip, please? Because we did quite the opposite.
In some ways, that's the beauty of baseball, because baseball fans tend to overreact to very isolated moments, right? Like they overreact to isolated moments in a very big picture. And you talked about it last week. If that's how you want to behave, then you should probably be a football fan.
Yes.
Where there's only a fraction of the games. That makes sense. But I think part of, the beauty of baseball in a lot of ways when it comes to just any kind of media about it is that it always is going to attract those people, and I think as a fan, you have to be aware of that. Part of the reason people can write reactionary things or, say reactionary things about a team 10 games into a year is because it generates interest. It does. And we all feel it. I mean, even as you watch a game and you watch the Mariners go through a game like they did the other day where they lose 12-4 and you're like, man, I feel like shit watching this. If you're a fan, like that is a terrible, terrible game to watch. But you don't really think about the big picture in that moment when your team is getting its ass kicked, because that's just human nature. So I understand why people do react the way that they do. But I also am like you, where I realize, hey, it's early in the year. Anything can happen. Nobody wants to hear that it's early, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, and I'll say this about this podcast. I don't think we're ever going to have a contrived argument. We're never going to have a hot take that's not a genuine take. So we're not doing, obviously by the fucking lack of viewership, we're not doing anything for clicks at this point. So this is like your and my actual opinions. You and I are never going to take opposite sides of an argument because conflict sells, for example. This isn't Fox Sports. This isn't ESPN. And this is my genuine opinion is it's it's early and the Mariners are probably going to be bad. So buckle up, because you're probably right that they suck, but also it's too early to be this angry about it, because you just can't sustain this level of anger for 162 games. You have to stop watching. If this is how you feel 2 weeks into the season, you have to stop watching, because you will get an ulcer from this baseball team. And that's a stupid thing to do.
That's why you got to mix in reality TV with the baseball, because reality TV will make you feel better about your life, and the Mariners will make you feel worse.
It's actually part of the Bill Burr bit, is that women would rather watch the Housewives than watch women trash each other than play a team sport together. It's a great bit, by the way. Whether you agree with it politically or not, you should go check it out. I'll send it to you, but the fans, I think we'll get kicked off of YouTube if I try to play it. But so the real big baseball news outside of, I will say, I'm gonna post a clip about this. David Aardsma talked about on that podcast, the reason all these arm injuries are occurring now is because everyone's trying to throw it as hard as they can and spin it as hard as they can on every single pitch. There's no, people talk about load management in terms of missing games, but they don't talk about it in terms of reducing your effort on a pitch by pitch basis, right? Sure. Even in football, they'll talk about guys like that guy takes a play off, and then other people will go, well, yeah, of course he does. You can't. If he's got to play 90% of the downs on the defensive line, he can't give 100% effort all 90 of those downs. You physically cannot, you do not have the stamina as a human being to do that. In hockey, nobody plays all 60 minutes. There's line changes. Those guys are playing probably, I don't know if this is right, but it's some of the leading minutes players in hockey are 25 minutes a game maybe, which is less than half of the game that they're actually on the ice. Is that actually? I'm curious how close I got to being correct on that, because I bet it's not that far.
That's probably about the high end for some of those guys.
So this is just a reality, and I actually saw a Justin Verlander quote. This is not on our list of topics, by the way, but he was talking about how in 2016, when the ball started to change, he started to try to find ways to increase velocity, increase movement, increase rotation, and that just reminded me that baseball has kind of created this problem on their own, which is, they keep doing stuff to create this competitive balance, to balance offense with defense, but they did change the ball. They did bring on this home run onslaught that everybody hated. It's their fault to a degree that this is happening because I mean it's not that's I know it's not
Well,
that like
they wanted an offensive league. I mean, it was
Yeah.
becoming pitching dominant, and they realized that wasn't attracting fans.
But they keep doing everything in the world except let's go back to the old balls where guys didn't have to throw full effort every pitch to make the ball move like they used to. Where like anyways, I don't know if you heard that part where he was talking about Kurt Schilling, like basically throwing 90% effort all but 5 pitches of the game, and I'm 90%. I'm sure it's not nearly as precise.
You can see it in like you just go watch videos of pitchers working out in the off season, and every pitch they throw is what I would consider violent. And
Right.
20 years ago, it was all about like your core, your balance. It was like doing yoga on the mound, and then you happen to throw a pitch. That's kind of what growing up as a pitcher was like in the 90s and early 2000s. It's like all about form, making sure you between starts you're always running. They love to make pitchers run. I don't even know if they do that as much now. Now you see the videos, these guys that work out hard in the off season, and they're doing like really targeted like muscle groups. They're lifting more. It used to be a pitcher would just run from foul pole to foul pole for like an hour, and that was his practice for the day outside of throwing.
Yeah.
So it has changed a lot. I mean, it's kind of how sports evolve. It's like how LeBron was like the rising tide that lifted all the boats. He came into the NBA and dudes were like, okay, we got to get like bigger and faster and stronger. How are we going to do that? And most of them just got leaner. But they had to keep up with these, I guess, new types of evolution, a new evolution in sports, and that's kind of what's happening with baseball.
Well, that's also, by the way, to kind of like tie it back to our earlier conversation. That was the Jordan era too. Those guys started lifting weights in the '90s, in the mid '90s, and bulked up, and it became a more physically imposing league.
Yeah, I mean, there's it's to every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. I mean, you see guys bulking up for baseballs, pitchers. You see with pitch counts lowering, guys know if I'm only going to throw 90 pitches in a start, I might as well max out on every single one of those 90 pitches if I can, because I want to make the most use out of them. There's such a focus now on efficiency because of pitch counts, and also like effort behind every single pitch, that it's not like, in the 90s, guys would routinely throw 120, 130 pitches. And so as a result, efficiency didn't matter as much. And you certainly weren't going to gas out for all 130, right? Like that wasn't something you were going to do.
Yeah.
So it's almost like
efficiency when you say efficiency, what do you mean? Because
I just mean getting the most out of every single pitch.
Oh, yeah. Like
before, it was like
sustainability mattered then.
Right. I mean, now you don't like waste pitches were a big thing in the 90s and 2000s. If you get ahead in the count 0-2, 1-2, you're wasting a pitch. There's still a little bit of that, but not as much. I mean, starting pitchers now in baseball are a lot like what relievers historically have been. Relievers, you could always count on a reliever coming out and going max effort for a single inning because he knew he was only going for an inning. Now a starter is like expected to go max effort for 6 innings. And that's asking a lot. And that's part of the reason why these guys have had to bulk up and get their bodies in shape in a way that they never had to before. And also why you see like the reaction to that, which is strain on ligaments. Cause you can't, you can get your muscles big, you can get your body toned the way you want, but your ligaments are still, they can break.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happens with a lot of these pitchers. I mean, it's been a rough week for Major League Baseball. A lot of their pitchers have gone down with UCL injuries that ultimately lead to Tommy John surgery. But a lot of it is just because of the way that they've asked these pitchers to evolve. And in time, I think bodies will adapt and you won't see this as much. But right now, it's kind of a transition phase in a way.
Yeah. So the reason that we were even getting to this is not to talk about the Tommy John the rash of Tommy John injuries or of UCL injuries that are leading to Tommy Johns, but the Oakland A's have finally made a decision, even after getting offered a lease with the city of Oakland for the Oakland Coliseum. It seems like it's final. Obviously, in these kind of situations, nothing is final, but in the 3 to 4 years expected to build a baseball stadium in Las Vegas, the Oakland A's, following the 2024 season, will be playing in the Sacramento minor league stadium. And you have to assume that part of this deal is probably they're going to make some renovations to this stadium to make it, more friendly and amenable to major league talent. I will say one part of this is if you're an Oakland A's fan and you plan on sticking with them through the transition to Las Vegas, which probably not a lot of the people who live in Oakland will, it's going to be borderline impossible to get free agents that are of any repute to go play their home games in a minor league stadium. I have to imagine it's going to be a tough 4 years, 3 years for the Oakland A's, followed by uncertainty because the Las Vegas Raiders, I think we've seen, and tell me if this is the perception you have also. The Las Vegas Raiders have had some trouble with. It's hard to have a home fan base there every week because Vegas is such a vacation city, because the team hasn't been there that long, and their stadiums are a lot more split fan wise than you'd expect to see at a Lumen Field or a different football stadium that is not, to be like having a home team in Hawaii or something like that.
Yeah, I'm intimately familiar with this situation from the Vegas perspective, not just with the A's, but some of these other teams. And it's interesting because Vegas, the first real major sports team they got was the Golden Knights. And I remember being there, I go to Vegas a few times a year. And I remember being there for the first month, in the first month that the Knights ever existed, I was in town for some games. And I think they were playing Winnipeg, and there were so many Winnipeg Jets fans there, and they'd all decided to make a vacation out of it. And on top of, this kind of local interest in the new team, the only pro team they really have, they were selling out their arena every single night. And I was just talking about this with a friend over the weekend because he's a big hockey guy. And as time has gone by, it's a lot easier to get a Golden Knights ticket. And part of that is because, the Raiders came to town. They've pulled some people away from Golden Knights games. And then also this allure of Vegas as a destination for your road teams has kind of worn off, right? Like the first year, it's a novelty. The first year, if you're a Winnipeg fan, you go to Las Vegas because, it's cool. It's a cool city to go hang out in, and you get to see your hockey team play. But you're probably not going to do that every single year, right? So that allure kind of wears off as time goes by. Now you have the competing interests of other teams in town if you're Vegas, with the NFL and maybe down the road NBA and Major League Baseball. The A's situation is unique because I don't think baseball can fill a stadium every single night the way a football game or a hockey game can.
Yeah.
Hockey and football are kind of in a class by themselves in that way. NBA is maybe somewhere in the middle because they have 82 games. And then baseball is always going to be the toughest draw. You'll get weekend fans for baseball. We know that, but you do have to win games to attract fans every day. And like you just said, the A's are not going to be coming into Vegas a good team, you would have to think, because A, they suck already. They suck already with no end in sight. And B, like you said, it's going to be very tough to draw free agents to a minor league stadium. I guess there, in some ways there is some precedence with this in hockey right now. The Arizona Coyotes a couple years ago moved from their legitimate pro arena to the arena on the Arizona State campus where their college hockey team plays. Pretty small arena, tough to make that attractive to veteran NHL players. I think that's going to be somewhat similar to what we see in Sacramento with A's players. It's certainly it's going to be tough to get guys to come and want to play there because the facilities aren't great. The amenities aren't great. But younger guys maybe, or guys who are just desperate to get a contract, certainly will be there. And by the time you move to Vegas, assuming everything goes to plan, which I think is a whole nother subject, I think it's going to be tough to come into town with a lot of steam behind the team that's entering Vegas. Now, the Vegas situation is complicated because it's timely in that they just closed the Tropicana Hotel and Casino this last week. And that is supposedly going to be the site for the Oakland A's baseball team to play on. It's right on the Strip. It's a pretty good location, I would say. But there's a couple problems with it. A a location on the strip for a baseball team is not ideal for locals. Like locals hate going to the strip. It'd be the same as if they put a team right there in like Pike Place Market. You probably wouldn't want to do that as a Seattleite, right?
Sure.
Just getting down there is a hassle.
Also, they're not that far away from Pike Place Market as it is.
It's not really that far.
Yeah.
But it does make a huge difference. I mean, think
Sure.
about it. If you're trying to park up there by Pike Place versus park by the stadiums, like even for as bad as it is by the stadiums, it's much easier than trying to park
Yeah, fair.
in the central part of downtown. So the strip is not an attractive location for locals to have to go to. It's not bad when they're doing it once a week for a football game or on the rare occasion for a hockey game, but it's a lot tougher for baseball to ask them to come out 81 times to a baseball game. So it's going to be tough, I think, to maybe sell up those season tickets for baseball. And then, unlike with football and hockey, the allure of an out-of-town baseball game is certainly tougher to replicate. You're going to get some fans that travel, but not on a regular basis, I would have to think. And then lastly, I mean, there are some real questions about the Oakland A's owner and the money that he has. He still hasn't secured financing for the stadium that's supposed to go on the Tropicana site in Vegas. So there's no guarantee a ballpark will ever get built there. They're gonna tear down Tropicana, but they wanted to do that before a baseball team was ever rumored to be coming there. So that might just end up being a parking lot. The fact that this demise of the casino hotel that on the land on which the A's will supposedly play, like that's not an indicator of what's going to happen with the A's necessarily, because the A's they don't have the money lined up right now to make a stadium possible.
What would you say is the probability, because that's another thing that seems to be part of this, is that Sacramento wants to be in position if something falls through in Las Vegas to be the new home of the A's? And what is your what's your feel for give me a percentage that you think they become the Sacramento A's?
I mean, I can't give you a percentage because I don't know what this dude's the thing about the A's owners. No, here's the thing about his finances that make this really interesting. He's locked up some civic money in Vegas, which is why, they're gung-ho on getting to Vegas, is because they've already got a pledge from the community that they will get X amount of dollars to build this stadium. But it's a fraction of what they need to actually build it. The rest is supposed to be privately funded by the A's owner, and nobody has any idea what his finances are, including the people in Vegas. So the fact that they even agreed to go into business with this guy who hasn't divulged his finances to them, that's a little shady. I mean, that's why this whole process is shady, is because Major League Baseball and the city, not of the city of Las Vegas, but the government of Nevada really agreed to go into business with this guy, and they don't even know where he stands financially.
Sure.
So they're committing to a move that they don't even know might happen. So why would you do this? I mean, really all it speaks to is that they wanted to get out of Oakland badly. They were willing to go play ball with this guy without knowing his finances because they were cool doing that to Oakland fans and getting out of Oakland. So
one thing about this is, and you and I have kind of had mixed feelings about this because of our experience with the Sonics, the people who this sucks the worst for, very obviously, are people who really do love the A's and live in Oakland.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough for them no matter what. But before even talk of selling the team came up, obviously the stadium in Oakland had a lot of issues. They had trouble for whatever reason getting a new stadium passed, whether that can always be on. I'm not trying to blame the city or the taxpayers. A lot of times the team itself creates those problems so that they can navigate away from a city. I mean, we saw that with the Sonics.
And I also I fully understand the citizens of a city not wanting to subsidize the enrichment of a billionaire.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's totally understandable why all of this could happen. And they already have, they've already financed another ballpark in San Francisco, so very close by. They have another team that's very close by. That's no consolation to an A's fan, I'm sure.
Sure.
But there is another team in their general vicinity. And Sacramento, if the A's become a nomadic franchise, if they're already in Sacramento and have played there for a couple of years, who knows? Maybe Sacramento steps up and says, hey, we're going to build you a real major league ballpark if you just stay here. And then maybe they do. Maybe they do end up there. Or maybe, it becomes a situation where they want to relocate somewhere else entirely. I mean, the distance between Oakland and San Francisco is like the distance between Seattle and Olympia, maybe slightly farther, but not by much. So it's like, if you're a Mariner fan and they move the team to Olympia, there's already a baked in fan base there, right? Like there's a lot of people locally in Sacramento that I'm sure are already A's fans that'll turn up to the games. And if you are an A's fan in Oakland, it's not entirely prohibitive for you to go to a game. You're probably not going to every game. You don't want to drive 2 hours each way to do that. But
Yeah.
to think that you just flat out can't go to a game anymore is silly. I mean, I guess in that regard, that's maybe where the comparisons between the A's and the Sonics end. When the Sonics were taken from us, there was no possible way a Sonics fan was going to be able to go to a game with any ease. They moved them halfway across the country. So to have it 2 hours away, not as bad.
I also tried to fact check that in real time because that didn't seem right to me, but I don't understand California geography very well. They are, it's 20 miles longer, but the same distance or same time estimate from Fangraphs, which is a real, or Fangraphs, Jesus Christ, from Google Maps. I'm actually doing my map, my directions on Fangraphs. Anyway, yeah, it's a shitty situation. We got to move on to, in the interest of time, move on from this. I want to skip the John Calipari news, who goes to Arkansas, which is, I think, a dynamic that we need to. It's going to continue to be related to NIL, and I'm pretty sick of talking about NIL, to be honest with you.
Well, I think there'll be more fallout for next week
sure.
and future episodes, just because there will be a coach. Anytime a big
there's a big opening in Kentucky, Lexington has an
carousel.
opening.
We saw it with football and Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah, absolutely. But I want to talk about this Bill Barnwell article about quarterbacks because I thought that he taught the I can't even remember what the title of the article was at this point. I took one bit of information from it, which to me was that it articulated a point that I already kind of had, and I want to kind of expound on it because he talks about how the modern rookie contract, which isn't this crazy, unaffordable, like Sam Bradford got the last big one, where it was like a franchise-altering contract to a guy who had not played a down in the NFL. Those guys could negotiate their own contracts. Now there's slotted pay, and no matter what, the slotted pay is probably going to be, if the player becomes worth anything, it's kind of like arbitration in baseball. He's going to be underpaid, and you're going to get value out of that position. And his argument was that because this is what like a good starter costs in the NFL, teams should be drafting more quarterbacks in the first round, even if they bust. The success rate right now is about 30%, but he had an equation that I can't remember exactly how he came to it, but it was like they represent 19% of now I can't remember what the exact. Maybe it was like I think it was the salary given to a first round quarterback is like 19% of the average starting quarterback or the average quarterback salary. Sure. And that's, to me, his argument is basically, even if you only succeed at 30%, keep fucking up to get to the point where you have a starting quarterback, because you need a starting quarterback. And that's kind of the reason why I think the Seahawks were smart to trade for Sam Howell, why I'm fine with them trading for Sam Howell and having Geno Smith on the roster, why I would continue to be fine, by the way, if they drafted Michael Penix. I do think they're probably going to, I think at very minimum, there will be a quarterback drafted by the Seahawks or acquired as a semi-high profile UDFA this year, which is kind of tough to say because there's not very many high profile undrafted free agents. But I do think they're going to make another commitment to a quarterback this year. And I think they should. That's the way the Packers have operated for years. I hope that it's the way that John Schneider has wanted to run the Seahawks, because if you don't have a guy, if you don't have a good quarterback, you're not going to be good. But I also think there's this thing that we do, or that's football teams do, that I disagree with, which is the moment they draft a quarterback, it's like they're with a partner who is so insecure about them being unfaithful that they have to pretend like no other woman has ever existed. Teams will draft a quarterback 30th, and then they have to pretend like they've never talked to another quarterback in the history of the world. We don't even acknowledge that other quarterbacks exist. There's some fucking guy we picked up for free. He's going to be your backup. We don't even know his name. We won't let him get a snap. He's out of our minds. He's just, it's like it's this really silly, immature way that they expect quarterbacks to behave. And I really think what they should be doing every year is drafting quarterbacks who they think could be good, taking the risk. Is Sam Howell, we have a lot of comments on our Sam Howell clip, by the way. Is Sam Howell, neither of us think that Sam Howell is for sure going to be a good quarterback with the Seahawks. Neither of us think that he's for sure going to be a Pro Bowl starter with the Seahawks. We don't think that about Geno Smith. I don't think that about Michael Penix. I think all of them have some probability of being good. You put all three on the same roster, which, by the way, half the teams in the NFL carry 3 quarterbacks on their active roster. That's one thing. 2, one of the reasons the Seahawks couldn't do it is because they spent several years with Nick Bellore, essentially a special teams specialist on their roster. Now that guy's not on the roster. You can carry a third quarterback. You'll never know he was there because you now don't have Nick Bellore taking up a roster spot and a bunch of salary. He was also making probably rookie quarterback salary. To get to the point, though, is keep bringing quarterbacks onto the roster. And I don't care if it's a first-round pick. I don't care if it's 16th overall. I would love to see them get a guy like Penix, trade back and still be able to get a guy like Penix if that's the case. But just keep bringing these dudes on the roster. And once Penix is there, let's say he becomes a franchise quarterback. Don't stop drafting quarterbacks. It's so important to have good quarterbacks on your roster. And we've seen the best teams in the NFL that have sustained success. The Packers keep drafting quarterbacks. From the time they drafted Brett Favre, Matt Hasselbeck became a trade chip. Matt Flynn was a quality backup that didn't end up getting traded. They drafted Aaron Rodgers, who becomes a Hall of Fame starter. They draft Jordan Love while Rodgers is still on the roster, and he becomes what looks like a pretty good starter at this point in his career. This is why these teams, the Packers had no break. There was never a time where they were really bad for very long. The Patriots did the same thing. Jimmy Garoppolo, Matt Castle, Ryan Mallett. These are guys that all got traded for something valuable.
Yeah, I'll talk about the trade thing in a second. I do think it's interesting with quarterbacks. It's the same thing happens with closers in baseball historically.
Dude.
It's like if you have more than one, then you don't even have one, right? If you have 2 quarterbacks, then you don't even have one. And there's always been this fear that it's almost like if you have 2 quarterbacks, like if you think back to when Washington had Robert Griffin and Kirk Cousins, they drafted them both in the same draft. If you have 2 of those guys, then you don't have one. They had to, like from day one, be very clear when they drafted both those guys that Robert Griffin was going to be the starter. It wasn't going to be Kirk Cousins, right? And then ultimately what happens? Kirk Cousins supplants Robert Griffin. Robert Griffin opens the door with an injury, and then Kirk Cousins takes over as the quarterback. Well, it is funny that they've always kind of operated with like these kid gloves with quarterbacks, almost like you don't want to disrupt the mentality of the quarterback themselves or the fragility of the relationships among teammates, right? Like the fear is always that your backup quarterback has the locker room and your starting quarterback doesn't have the respect of the guys. I think you actually have seen that recently in Seattle a little bit at the end of Russell Wilson's tenure. People they raved about how Geno Smith as the backup had really captured the locker room and befriended a lot of the receivers, and Russell hadn't done that as much, right? So there is kind of this fear that sort of thing can happen. Well, like with closers in baseball, we've seen this change where in baseball especially, teams don't really have just one closer anymore. Like the days of a Mariano Rivera or Trevor Hoffman seem to be behind us. Like a lot of those saves records, they might stand for a while because a lot of teams, while they do have a guy that primarily lean on in the 9th inning of ball games, they do have like 1 or 2 other guys that they can count on in those very high leverage situations. And like what we've seen with the Mariners, you know, if your closer, if the other team has the best part of their lineup coming up in the 8th rather than the 9th, you might go to your closer in the 8th just to shut down those very good hitters instead of worrying about the optics of always bringing that person in the 9th inning. So
this is like unrelated. Yeah. I just want to make a statement and then move on from it and let you continue. Yeah. I think we've exited the record-breaking era of baseball. I think most major records, home runs, wins, strikeouts, hits, RBIs, all that stuff, I think those records are going to stand for basically ever. We're never going to see guys play every day and play as many innings or pitch as many innings, pitch as many games as we did in the past. I think it's done. The game that's kind of predicated itself on these hallowed records, I think it's over.
I can get behind it. I would say let's save it for another day because I think it's a topic that
I'm not trying to derail the topic. I was just saying I just wanted to say it because it was on my mind.
Yeah, I totally get it. But yeah, I think with quarterbacks, it's kind of the same thing. Like now, I think there is some understanding that you can have more than one decent quarterback, and it's not going to hurt you. And if anything, it's probably just going to help you.
Yes.
obviously, if you have a franchise guy like Patrick Mahomes, no reason to go out of your way and find another guy necessarily, unless you foresee the end coming, right? Like, I think the Patriots are a great example of this. For years, they were capitalizing off their backups by trading them. Tom Brady was entrenched, but they would draft a quarterback late, and they would turn that into some real value by ultimately trading a guy like Garoppolo or a guy like Matt Castle, things like that.
I think they took Garoppolo in the second round, by the way.
Yeah, well, and then they still profited off him.
No, for sure.
But I think there's been a correction a little bit, and a couple of things happened. First, with regard to the Patriots themselves, even though they saw the end of Tom Brady coming, they didn't really prepare for it very well. Despite kind of drafting and profiting off all these quarterbacks, they knew the end was near for Tom Brady, and they were behind. They didn't play this game that other teams are now starting to play, where they draft a bunch of quarterbacks and maximize them. Instead, they kept this cycle going of getting rid of them and then ultimately landing on Mac Jones, who turned out to be a bust.
Yeah.
And
well, that's really, I think that the thing that they did is, I think they thought they were preparing with a guy who was like, and it just didn't work out with Mac Jones.
And it didn't work out. Yeah. But if your theory holds, then they would have had 2 or 3 of those guys. They would have had 3 different types of Mac Joneses so that they didn't run into this problem.
Well, they're never going to carry 4 quarterbacks.
Right.
They had a bunch of bites at the apple, and it fell in a weird time in the cycle. And a noted UW fan, Bill Belichick, had some kind of bad luck at the end of his career, which it's so weird, by the way, to see him in UW gear, but not to derail us.
Well, it is interesting because in that era, in that time, like when the Seahawks went out and signed, Matt Flynn for big money, 10 years ago or so, you could still profit off your quarterback if your starter was a good starter, right? The thought always was, if you have like a generational starter, then their backup must be at least above average, right? That was the thought when people were taking chances on Tom Brady's backups and some of these other guys' backups. Now there's been like this correction where a guy like Justin Fields barely commands anything in trade. So this market is kind of shifting in trade. I think the era of the trade capitalization off quarterbacks maybe has come and gone. And if it hasn't come and gone, at least the value isn't there for your high draft pick quarterback.
Well, I think
the
move now, frankly, isn't to trade the backup. It's to trade the starter. It's the Seahawks trading Russell Wilson. It's Houston trading Deshaun Watson. I think they've corrected to realize that a lot of these guys that are somewhere between, like, I don't know where you draw the cutoff at, like, who is truly a special quarterback. I think you and I both obviously think Patrick Mahomes is one of those guys. I think that Lamar Jackson could be argued. I think that, CJ Stroud feels that way right now. Josh Allen maybe is a special quarterback, but like beyond those guys, if you don't have one of those guys, like 5 to 50 or 5 to 30 or whatever, like these guys in a given year, in a given system with enough talent around them might be able to put up or, put together a run, whatever.
Well, I think that's where football is unique. They tend to, once they find a quarterback, they typically ride that guy till he retires. That's not very common in other sports. You don't see that in baseball. In baseball, generally, if a guy is getting older, teams will try to find a suitor for him. In basketball,
that's
thing.
Only since it became prohibitive for teams to keep those guys, and that's what's happening in football right now. Is like it's becoming a thing where Kirk Cousins would have never left Minnesota. Frankly, Kirk Cousins would have never left Washington. But we live in this time where Kirk Cousins, who I think most people would consider something like a between 5th and 15th best quarterback in the NFL, is commanding $45 million a year. And there's not a lot of teams that are winning with $45 million a year quarterbacks.
Yeah, I get your arguments. I totally understand. It makes sense to me. And I guess this is my own fault. I didn't read the article. You sent it to me, and I said, this is like a 20,000 word article on some dumb shit.
Well, and I told you, I looked at the table that suggested that quarterbacks are, and I guess that's the thing to me is like when you draft a receiver in the first round, or you draft an offensive lineman in the first round, I understand these are different positions and the dynamic is different, but you don't go like, well, that's the only person getting snaps at receiver. That's the only person getting snaps at left tackle. even like these defensive players, you're like, well, yeah, of course we're gonna, even though we're drafting this edge rusher, 8th overall, whatever, he's still gonna rotate in and out. He's still only gonna play like 65% of the snaps, and that's kind of the like. I'm not saying you're doing the exact same thing with a quarterback, but to me, it's like if it's the most important position, you should get more than one shot at it.
Yeah, I think in every other position in football, in every other position in almost every sport, there is always some element of competition for that position. Even if you're as good as it gets, there's another guy on the roster that plays your position typically that has a chance to play it, And in football, while you do have a backup, the reality of the backup in football is, like you said, it's more of an afterthought than anything else. We have to have that guy in case the other guy gets hurt, but that's the only reason he's here. And I think what teams are realizing is that element of competition doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be excluded from the quarterback position. And that's financially beneficial to a lot of these teams. And because teams have really prioritized the financial aspects of their organizations the past few years, it makes sense. It makes sense that you would go draft more quarterbacks because you don't have to pay those rookie quarterbacks a lot. And I mean, I think part of that is just because within the last 10 years, dating back to like when Sam Bradford got that last huge first round quarterback contract, when they redid that whole contract scale so that guys weren't going to get paid the way that they used to, even in the first round, it made it more feasible to spend your draft capital on a quarterback and understand that, like, hey, this, even if this guy doesn't work out, it's not going to just completely kill us financially.
Yep. Okay. You want to play the home run game? Call her dead.
Let's play it. This is our
I'm going to give
second
you,
week back.
I have two, both these guys, I feel like it's possible we've had in the past. And so I have a third in case. My number one choice, and you can, this one is the one I feel I want to do the most, but I also feel like it's the most likely we've done this one, is one Russell Branyan.
We've definitely done Russell Branyan.
Okay, we'll skip Russell Branyan.
But the beauty of, even if we've done it before, is I don't remember the number.
Yeah, but let's not do one we've done before. If we know for sure we have. My second choice, the recently retired, which makes me feel like it's more likely we have not done him as one of our topics, is Mike Zunino.
Yeah, I don't think we've done Zunino. Yeah.
Okay.
And sad that he's already retired because it still feels like he's a budding prospect that's just waiting to pop. That was always the thing with Zunino. Yeah, that was the thing with Zunino. No matter where he went, everybody was like, this is the year. He's going to pop this year. And then all of a sudden he retires. And he never popped. But he was a good home run hitter.
Yeah.
I do know, obviously, the beginning of his career with the Mariners. Man, I can't remember the exact year he was drafted, but I want to say he had like a, I don't know, 8 or 9 year major league career, which might be underselling him, but he also was up and down a little bit. I remember being at a Mariner game where he did pop and had like 2 or 3 home runs at Safeco Field at the time. My dad was there. He was very excited because he thought Zunino was going to be good. And he was at times, but not consistently. Man, I'm trying to logic the number of years with the number of home runs he had. He was just never available enough to have, like, I don't think he had a 30 home run season. And I want to say he probably averaged less than 20. He certainly averaged less than 20 over the course of, let's say, even 10 years. That would be less than 200 home runs. I'm going to kind of half-ass this. As a catcher, he's certainly not playing every day. I'm going to say 111 home runs.
Okay. There's some critical mistakes you made.
I believe it. Yeah.
One is, I think you started out, he played 11 years. You started out at 8 years. It was 11. You said 10 by the end.
I always change it about half.
Yeah, that's fine. 2021, he hits 33 home runs. Ooh. He hits 33 home runs. He hits 2 of his 5 career triples. 33 home runs, 11 doubles. 216 batting average, 301 on base. Like, still classic Zunino strikeout problems.
I neglected to remember that every hit he ever had in his career was a home run.
Yes,
if he didn't hit a home run, then he certainly didn't get a hit.
He had a 4-year. By the way, 2021. He is 20th in the MVP voting and makes his sole All Star game appearance, despite playing. Is 2021 a shortened season? It was only 2020 was shortened, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I don't think 2021 was. Maybe it was. I don't know. God, it's only been 3 years, but my mind
No,
is mush from that.
the Rays went 162, so that's a full season. He only plays 109 games, but still 20th in MVP voting. Very good season for Mike Zunino. Has ends his career with 4 seasons of 20 plus home runs, and then obviously, so 149 home runs is where he ends up, which is
but not great. I
undersold
it.
Not the best. If we were going by percentage, it's a tough percentage because we were in relatively low altitude of home runs. You end up not too bad. What did you say? 111?
111. Yeah. So yeah, he wasn't one that was going to hurt me too much either way, most likely. But still missing that one by 38. Not great. I'm not going to ask you who your third guy was. Maybe you can save that one for next time.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll do it next time.
As long as it's not the guy that I picked for you. And the guy I picked for you, I can't remember if we talked about him briefly last week, but something triggered me to remember his name. And I'll say no more beyond that. Prince Fielder.
Oh, we talked about him because we were talking about Vlad Guerrero Jr. being a big fatty, and him winning the MVP.
It was our predictions. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Man, Prince Fielder's a guy who's like the one off season that the Mariners flirted with him. Everybody, and I want to say it was like, Ardsmo was talking about the 2009 Mariners. I feel like it was like the 2011 season. Everybody was like, Prince Fielder's coming to Seattle, done deal, write it down. And then I think, who did they end up with? They ended up with someone obviously very disappointing. And Fielder would have been pretty disappointing. He had a short career after that. Fielder's I think had 1 or 2 seasons with 50 home runs, but this is brutal because he hit a lot of home runs every year he played, I believe, or at least every year he played a full season, and then now it just matters how many seasons he played. So I want to say he's in a similar range of 11 or 12 seasons, probably averages at the beginning 35 home runs a year, and then trails off a little bit. But with some big spikes in there, I'm really hating this. I'm going 298 home runs. That's my guess.
Pretty good. Pretty good. I will say that. You were right that he played 12 years. All but 3 of those, he pretty much played the whole season. Mm-hmm. So 9 of those 12, he's basically playing a full season. It's, the thing about being fat is you can't pull fat. So his availability was pretty good most years. He wasn't.
You can't pull fat.
He was mostly available. But the first season he comes up is 2005. He only plays 39 games. That's his entry into the majors. 2014 must have been injury marred. He only plays 42. And then his last season, 2016 with Texas, only plays 89. But 2015, the year in between those two, he actually he was an all-star and he played 158 games. So even towards the end of his career, he still had some memorable performances. He only hit 50 home runs once in 2007 with Milwaukee. He ends up being a 6-time all-star. Plays the start of his career with the Brewers. The year that you were thinking of where the Mariners were flirting with him, I believe, was between 2011 and 2012. Where
I think that's exactly what I said, by the way. That's pretty great.
You said 2011, I believe, which is correct. It was the offseason between those two where he ultimately ends up signing with Detroit. But I remember that there was a day, there was rumors that he was in Seattle, and he was never in Seattle. But there was just rumors on social media that Prince Fielder was here and he was going to sign with the Mariners, and then he ends up going to the Tigers. And I'll never forget being at a game the Mariners were playing against the Tigers. He only spends the 2012 and 2013 seasons there, but there was a game against the Tigers and he platinum sombreroed 5 strikeouts in the game. It was pretty incredible to watch because at the time, he's one of the bigger names in baseball. Yeah. To see a guy strike out 5 times in a game, regardless of their stature, is incredible. But to see a guy that good do it was
to get 5 plate appearances means that his team was playing pretty well. They probably
and he
put
was
up
not.
a fair amount of runs. So
and
Prince Fielder contributed nothing to it.
platinum sombrero. I'll never forget it. So ultimately, almost every season he has is double-digit home runs, except those 3 where he only plays partial. So every season he was available for the full year, he hit at least over 20 home runs. So 23 was his low outside of those 2 injury seasons and his entry season. Total number 319. So
damn, that's not bad.
21, pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good. Okay. All right. So I think I'm for 2 weeks now. This is like one time I played a round of golf and I birdied the first hole and parred the second, and it was the first time I've ever gone into the third hole under par. And that's the only time, by the way. And I feel like that's what's going to happen here. Is like 1 week I'm putting up a triple bogey and you're going to put up a respectable par, and a very fundamentally sound par, and we'll just be back to even or you winning. But for now, I'm fucking kicking your ass.
You probably have so that was 21 and I missed by 38. So that's a difference of 17.
Yeah. And then last week we were pretty close, 47 to 50.
Okay. So you have like a 20 home run lead. It felt worse than it was. Maybe because I missed the mark by more than I thought on both those guys.
Yeah.
But it's not insurmountable.
No. There's a lot of baseball, a lot of home run games still to be played, folks. So
the trick is like finding guys that matter, because like obviously I don't want to throw like guys at you that only hit like 24 home runs or something.
Well, but also like even let's say I missed them by 100%, I'm still the worst I can be off is 24 home runs or something like that. So,
right. So it's like these guys, like a Prince Fielder is perfect, 319 career home runs. That's like. That's like a perfect middle ground. There's not like I need to start looking at home run lists and see who's around Prince Fielder on those lists or something.
Wow, you're giving your strategy away. All right, come see me do stand-up comedy, please. Crowd work show at Tacoma Comedy Club. I'm at a theater in Prineville, Oregon, I think is how it's pronounced, which is maybe the only time that city has ever existed in the world. I'm willing it into existence. Bickerson's Brewhouse every month. This month I'm not going to be there, but we have a tremendous lineup. Vanessa Dawn, who's done a bunch of shows for me and with me, is moving to San Diego, and this is going to be one of the last shows she does in Seattle. I'll be in Post Falls, Idaho, and headlining Spokane Comedy Club in a couple weeks. And yeah, man, I'm all over Vancouver, Washington, Black Raven Brew. I'm all over the Pacific Northwest, and then I'm going to be in Newport, Oregon, at another theater on May 31st. So I'll fucking update my calendar at some point. Casey McLean comedy everywhere except for Twitter, where, oh, by the way, Alex is verified and he's pretending like he's not. He's hiding it from everybody by not showing his check mark. I told you that.
You didn't even bring it up last week.
I know you didn't. And now I'm doing the same thing. So we're just our Elon stans over here at
I'll be curious to hear
podcast.
Make sure you sign up for the ad revenue, because it's the only reason.
Alex, you better retweet me some more, because I don't have enough.
I'm curious because I have a theory on the Twitter ad revenue. Like basically, I'm paying for nothing right now because my money that I get back in ad revenue is at or above what I pay in my subscriptions.
Well, follow me and retweet me, folks. I need to see some. I need to have more like engagement to qualify for the ad revenue. So,
but my theory is I think you're going to be okay.
But I have to qualify. I can't qualify.
I'm going to tell you next time will be. Oh, you're not qualified to sign up yet.
Yes.
Oh, that's
see.
Damn.
See what I'm saying?
Okay. Well, then I can't test my theory on you. But if anyone wants to hear the theory, I'll share it next time.
Anyone that wants to hear the theory, retweet me so more people see my shit. All right. Bye, everybody. We love you deeply.